comes to the danger that could be lurking as I'm standing there waiting for an elevator to come. Another fear that I've always had when it comes to elevators, fear of the freaking elevator cables snapping while I'm inside the elevator car and then plummeting all the way down to the bottom. And I know me, I would probably be so freaked out the entire way down that I really wouldn't be able to brace myself in any way before the impact. Then boom, every bone in my body is shattered or something. I'm crushed. I'm done for. I know that elevators have all types of built-in brakes and everything nowadays. So there's actually a great chance at surviving a fall in the elevator because it will kind of stop itself in other ways, you know what I mean? But still, who knows for sure? That's still something I think about every single time I get on an elevator. Anyway, after all of these elevator thoughts, it dawned on me. Elevators are scary. I bet all types of creepy things have happened involving these bad boys. We know about Elisa Lamb and the footage from the Cecil Hotel. I know there's something creepy going on with these elevators. And you know what happened next, right? If you don't, you should. Welcome to Creepy Chronicles, Elevators. But before we get started, I want to let you know right now, this video will contain bits about paranormal activity, bits of true crime, as well as other very unsettling, heartbreaking events surrounding elevators. What I'm really trying to say is, some viewers may find this video rather disturbing, so viewer discretion is definitely advised. Okay, let's go. While doing my research, I realized that there are quite a few hotels that have haunted elevators. But one hotel that really stood out to me was the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas, Texas. Apparently, there have been several fatalities surrounding this hotel's elevators over the years, with the first happening just 2 weeks after the hotel opened in 1912. And before I tell you these stories, I want you to have the correct type of elevator in mind. These weren't the type of elevators that we usually see today with the solid doors. From what I read, these seem to be like the old-fashioned elevators where you manually pull the elevator gate open, step onto the elevator car, then close the elevator gate behind you. You know what I'm talking about. And if the elevator car wasn't present on that floor at the time, it would just kind of be a hollow space behind the elevator gate. Those elevators. I hope that made sense. But yeah, so 2 weeks after the Adolphus Hotel opened, a waiter who had just arrived at the hotel from Chicago the previous day, he was standing outside the elevators about to get ready to step into the elevator car, but he turned around to say something to someone really fast. As he was talking to this person, he began to step backwards into what he thought would be his elevator car. And instead, he ended up falling 3 stories down the elevator shaft, not realizing that his elevator car had already left. His skull was crushed on impact, and he ended up passing away 2 hours later. In 1917, an elevator operator at this hotel tried to hop killing him instantly. These weren't the only incidents that happened at the Adolphus Hotel elevators, but you kinda get my drift. And to no one's surprise, there have been several reports of paranormal activity when it comes to the Adolphus elevators. People say that sometimes you can hear the moans of the deceased coming through the walls of the elevators. Sources say that some people have also reported spotting the mangled forms of former hotel employees riding beside them, and they're usually dressed in old-fashioned uniforms, warning guests to watch their steps before disappearing. Goodness, I wonder if it's safe to take the stairs there. The Crockett Hotel in San Antonio, Texas, also seems to have some haunted elevators. Apparently, the staff at the hotel have actually named them the haunted elevators. It is said that the elevator doors open and close frequently without anyone getting on or off of them. The elevators will actually skip past the floors that you've chosen to get off on. In 2011, one of the hotel's housekeepers had called an elevator to the floor that she was on, and when it got there, she decided to walk into it backwards so that she could pull her cleaning cart inside with her, right? Well, something happened to where the elevator hadn't made a full stop on the floor that she was on. It continued going up to the next floor, so when she stepped backwards, she ended up falling all the way down the empty elevator shaft. Sadly, she did not survive this fall. And something that's crazy too is, after being tested, it was actually determined that the elevator was in great working order. Nothing was wrong with it, so it was almost as if the elevator had taken a mind of its own. And despite the fact that the elevators seemingly work just fine, guests aren't allowed to use that elevator anymore, and the staff straight up refuse to use the elevator. I don't blame them. That's creepy. At the Emily Morgan Hotel, also located in San Antonio, Texas, guests have reported the elevators taking them up to the 7th floor for some reason. And apparently the 7th floor in this hotel is completely unoccupied, and it's not really meant for guests to be on that floor at all. And when the doors open to the 7th floor, guests instantly get like a very uneasy feeling in their gut. They also experience a cold chill and goosebumps, making them believe that there's probably something creepy present on the 7th floor of that hotel. In 2011, a 73-year-old woman named Dolores Gillespie, she hired a man named Jerome Isaac to do odd jobs for her and kinda help her out around her apartment. This was in the Prospect Heights area of Brooklyn, New York, by the way. Miss Gillespie soon discovered that Jerome had been stealing from her, so understandably, she fired him. This really upset Jerome, so he decided to do the unthinkable. On December 17th, he went to Miss Gillespie's apartment building dressed as an exterminator. He went up to the floor that Miss Gillespie lived on, and he waited by the elevators. Miss Gillespie had gone grocery shopping that day, and when she returned to her apartment building, she took the elevator up to her floor, and as the elevator doors opened, she was met by Jerome Isaac, who began spraying her with gasoline. He cornered her in the elevator and drenched her in it. After that, he set her ablaze. was inside, still alive, thankfully. But she had suffered a broken pelvis, a broken back, and a broken neck. Poor Betty. But she would go on to make a full recovery. And as of today, she holds the Guinness World Record for the longest fall survived in an elevator. 75 stories. That is crazy, but amazing. First, she survived the plane crashing into the building she was working in, suffered some burns from the fire, but she pushed through. Then she's rescued, put on an elevator, and plummets 75 stories down, but she survives. Amazing. Another tiny fear I have is being stuck on an elevator, and that fear became reality a couple years back. I was actually getting off of work when it happened. Me and two of my coworkers got on the elevator, getting ready to head down to the first floor so that we can go home, right? It had already been a long day that day. I was practically running out of there, okay? We get on the elevator, we press 1, and the doors begin to close. Then all of a sudden, before the elevator doors even close all the way, the elevator car drops a little over a foot down, and it's just stuck there. By this time, the doors had closed all the way, so we couldn't just hop back out. We're pressing the open door button. Nothing is happening. We're pressing the first floor button over and over. Still not working. My coworker is trying to pry the door open. That's obviously not working. Luckily, we do have an emergency button in the elevator that calls the security desk downstairs, right? So we press the button. Security comes on the speaker. We let them know that we're stuck. The lady says, okay, I'm about to report this to the elevator company. They're right down the street. It shouldn't take them long to get here. Y'all, we were stuck in the elevator for over 45 minutes before you're riding the elevator in that building, it'll stop on a random floor for no apparent reason. But once the doors close, you begin to hear soft crying or singing as the elevator begins to travel all the way up to the 13th floor, even though no one has pressed the button for the 13th floor. Creepy. Easton, Maryland is said to have their own fair share of creepy elevators as well. Most notably, the elevators at the Avalon Theater. A former owner of the theater said that an actress was once found dead in one of the theater's elevators. She had been killed by someone and they kind of stashed her body in the elevator. It is said that she can sometimes be seen stepping out of the elevator, looking right at you before turning and going towards the doors that lead to the theater. Apparently, the elevator dings at random times of the day, even after hours, as if someone has called the elevator or taken the elevator down. But a lot of times, no one is ever seen getting on or off of the elevators when this happens. The old surgical hospital in Easton, Maryland is said to have some creepy footstep and elevator action going on. It's not a hospital anymore. It was actually transformed into an office space. But the people who work at this office have reported the elevators coming and going, followed by the sound of footsteps. But when they go to see who it is, no one is there. At the Odd Fellows Hall, which was like a meeting place for a fraternity called the International Fraternity of Odd Fellows. Here they would do different services to help out with the community, especially for the disadvantaged. But apparently they would also do these rituals. In these rituals, they would use human skeletons. Don't ask me what kind of rituals these were. But now, the people who live in this same building, they say that the elevators run all night while people are supposed to be sleeping. People have complained about it, but no one was ever found getting on or off of them. enjoyed